London, 1845. Grace Darlington clutched her meagre possessions to her chest as rain battered the carriage windows. Each jolt of the wheels over cobblestones reminded her of how far she had fallen. Once the cherished daughter of a respected merchant family, now she was nothing but damaged goods, cast out and disowned. "Love is a luxury afforded only to those who remain unblemished," she whispered to herself, the mantra that had sustained her through these past 3 months of shame. The carriage slowed before an imposing townhouse in Mayfair. Grace drew a steadying breath, adjusting the simple black bonnet that concealed most of her auburn hair. Her new position as companion to the elderly Dowager Duchess of Blackmere would provide shelter and anonymity, all she could hope for now. The coachman opened the door, exposing her to the downpour. "Number 16, Miss, Blackmere House." Grace stepped down, her worn boots splashing in a puddle as she faced her future with resignation. The scandal had destroyed everything. Her father's denial, her mother's tears, her fiancé's cruel abandonment, each betrayal had carved away pieces of her heart until she doubted anything remained. "I need nothing but survival now," she reminded herself as she approached the servant's entrance, appropriate for her diminished station. Affection is merely the prelude to devastation. The housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, greeted her with a critical eye. "You're the new companion, then. Her Grace was expecting you an hour ago." The roads from Hampshire were difficult in the storm. "I apologize for the delay." Mrs. Finch sniffed. "You'll need to be more punctual in Her Grace's service. She tolerates little inconvenience." "I understand. Do you, I wonder?" The housekeeper's gaze lingered on Grace's plain appearance. "Her Grace is particular about appearances. Your references must have been exceptional for her to overlook your circumstances." Grace flinched. Had the scandal followed her even here? "I assure you, my circumstances will not interfere with my duties." "See that they don't. Her Grace has enough troubles without adding yours. The Duke returns from his estate tomorrow, and the household must run perfectly." "The Duke? I wasn't aware he resided here." "Lord Thomas Briarwood generally keeps to his country estate, but Parliament is in session, Mrs." Finch's expression softened marginally. "He's not like other nobles, works harder than most commoners, truth be told, tries to right the world's wrongs through legislation. An admirable but futile pursuit, if you ask me." Grace nodded, filing away this information. She would need to remain invisible to all members of the household, especially the Duke. Men of power had proved the most dangerous to her already tenuous reputation. "You'll sleep in the small chamber adjacent to Her Grace's rooms. She often requires attention during the night. Your duties begin at dawn." Grace was shown to her quarters, a room barely large enough for the narrow bed and washstand it contained, but it was clean and private, more than she had dared hope for. That evening she met the Dowager Duchess, a sharp-eyed woman of 70 whose frail appearance belied a formidable intellect. The old woman studied Grace with unsettling intensity. "So you're the merchant's daughter from Hampshire?" The Duchess tapped her cane impatiently. "Your former governess speaks highly of your education and character. Miss Winters was very kind to recommend me." "Kind hardly. Practical more like. She knows I cannot abide simpletons or gossips." The Duchess leaned forward. "You've had your share of trouble, I understand." Grace's heart stuttered. "Your Grace, I save your explanations. I care little for society's hypocrisy. You read well, play the pianoforte tolerably, and can manage correspondence without spelling errors. That's all I require." She waved a gnarled hand. "Besides, my grandson finds it amusing when I scandalize the ton by employing those they've cast aside." Grace's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you, Your Grace." "Don't thank me yet. I'm a demanding mistress. Now read to me from this volume of poetry until I fall asleep. My eyes fail me in the evenings." And so began Grace's new life, secluded within the walls of Blackmere House, invisible to the world that had rejected her. The routine suited her desire for anonymity. Mornings spent reading correspondence to the Duchess, afternoons managing her social calendar and accompanying her on short walks when the weather permitted, evenings reading aloud until the old woman dozed in her chair. For 2 peaceful days, Grace managed to avoid any interaction with the Duke, glimpsing him only once from a window as he departed for Parliament. Tall and broad-shouldered, he cut an imposing figure even from a distance. She had retreated quickly, determined to remain unnoticed. On the third evening, however, her careful avoidance ended abruptly. The Duchess had requested a particular book from the library after dinner, sending Grace to retrieve it while the household settled for the night. The library was dimly lit, a single lamp burning on a desk. Grace moved quietly among the shelves, searching for the requested volume when the door opened behind her. "Grandmother, I've brought those parliamentary papers the deep voice halted. Grace turned, finding herself face to face with the Duke of Blackmere. Up close, he was even more striking, dark hair shot with premature silver at the temples, intelligent grey eyes, a strong jaw currently tensed in surprise. "Forgive me, Your Grace," she said, dropping into a curtsy. "I didn't realize anyone would be here. I'm merely fetching a book for the Dowager Duchess." His expression shifted from surprise to curiosity. "You must be the new companion, Mrs. Finch mentioned. Miss Darlington, isn't it?" "Yes, Your Grace." She kept her gaze lowered, praying he wouldn't recognize her name from the scandal sheets. "Which volume does my grandmother require at this hour? She's developed quite the appetite for Gothic novels lately, I've noticed." Grace's lips quirked involuntarily. "Actually, sir, it's Malthus's Essay on the Principle of Population. Her Grace said it helps her sleep better than laudanum." A startled laugh escaped him. "That sounds like grandmother." Heavy economic theory as a soporific. He moved to a nearby shelf, scanning the titles. "It should be here somewhere." "Ah," he retrieved a leather-bound tome. "This is the one." Their fingers brushed as he handed her the book, sending an unexpected warmth through Grace's arm. She withdrew quickly, clutching the volume to her chest. "Thank you, Your Grace. I should return to Her Grace immediately." "Of course." He hesitated, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Have we met before, Miss Darlington? You seem familiar." Grace's blood ran cold. "I don't believe so, Your Grace. I've only recently come to London." "From Hampshire, correct? My estate borders several merchant families there." "My family's connections are modest, sir. I doubt our paths would have crossed." The lie tasted bitter, but necessary. Her father's shipping business had been among the largest in the county before the scandal forced him to sell his shares. "Perhaps you're right." He inclined his head. "Good evening, Miss Darlington." Grace curtsied again and fled, her heart hammering against her ribs. The encounter had been brief but dangerous. If he recognized her, if he remembered the gossip. She delivered the book to the Duchess, who was already dozing in her chair. Grace gently roused her and helped her to bed, mind still racing with worry. "You met my grandson, I see," the old woman remarked as Grace arranged the bedcovers. "Briefly, Your Grace. He assisted me in finding your book. Thomas has always been helpful. Too helpful sometimes, takes on the world's burdens as his personal crusade." The Duchess studied Grace's face. "He's unmarried, you know, at 35, practically a confirmed bachelor. I'm sure his affairs are none of my concern, Your Grace." "No." Pity, the old woman settled against her pillows. "He needs someone who understands loss, someone who values substance over appearance." Grace remained silent, unwilling to encourage such dangerous speculation. She had learned her lesson about reaching above her station. Dreams and desires led only to destruction. Over the next fortnight, Grace developed a routine carefully designed to avoid the Duke. She would accompany the Duchess downstairs only after confirming Lord Briarwood had departed for Parliament. When he dined at home, she took her meals in the kitchen or her chamber. During family gatherings, she made herself useful in other parts of the house. Despite her precautions, their paths crossed occasionally. Once in the garden where she walked with the Duchess, he joined them briefly, discussing some political matter with his grandmother while stealing glances at Grace. Another time in the drawing room, where Grace sat quietly with her needlework while the Duchess entertained visitors, he entered unexpectedly, his gaze finding hers across the crowded room. Each encounter left Grace increasingly unsettled, not from fear of discovery, but from something far more dangerous, interest. The Duke was unlike any aristocrat she had ever met. He spoke passionately about factory reforms, educational initiatives for the poor, and sanitation improvements in London's slums. His hands bore calluses from riding and occasional physical labor, and his eyes held genuine concern when he inquired after his grandmother's health. Grace found herself lingering over newspapers, reading his speeches in Parliament. She discovered his name on pamphlets advocating for women's property rights. Once she overheard the housekeeper mention how he had personally carried coal to an ill servant rather than wake the footman during a snowstorm. Dangerous thoughts, she chided herself one evening, closing a volume of his published essays on prison reform. He is a duke, you are ruined, remember your place. The reminder was timely, for the next morning brought a rude awakening. Grace entered the breakfast room to find the Duchess reading the society pages, her face grim. "It seems your past has caught up with you, Miss Darlington," the old woman said without preamble, folding the newspaper. Grace froze, her teacup halfway to her lips. "Your Grace." The Duchess pushed the paper across the table. There, in damning black ink, was a brief mention. Sources confirm that the disgraced daughter of merchant Joseph Darlington, whose scandalous affair with a married naval officer ended in tragedy last season, has secured a position in one of London's most respected households. One wonders if her employer is aware of the moral character of the young lady in question. Grace set down her cup, her hand trembling so badly that tea sloshed over the rim. "I should pack my belongings immediately." "Whatever for?" The Duchess raised an eyebrow. "Surely you don't wish to keep me on after this?" Grace couldn't meet the older woman's eyes. "Miss Darlington, if I dismissed staff every time some gossip monger printed malicious half-truths, I'd be serving my own tea and making my own bed." The Duchess tapped the newspaper. "Is there truth to this?" Grace swallowed hard. "Some, Your Grace. I became involved with a man I believed to be unmarried. When I discovered the truth, I ended the relationship, but not before." She closed her eyes briefly. "Not before indiscretions had occurred. His wife discovered us. The scandal was significant. And the tragedy they mention." Grace's voice dropped to a whisper. "He took his own life rather than face the consequences. His note blamed me for his ruination." The Duchess was silent for a long moment. "I see. And your family?" "Disowned me. My father's business connections threatened to sever ties if he didn't publicly repudiate me." The pain was still raw, even months later. "My mother sent one letter, secretly. She said perhaps in a few years, once the scandal fades." "But you don't believe that?" "No, Your Grace. Some stains never wash clean." The Duchess folded the newspaper decisively. "Well, I've never had patience for laundry metaphors. People are not linens, Miss Darlington. This changes nothing regarding your position here." Relief washed through Grace. "You're most generous, Your Grace." "I'm most practical. You're efficient, intelligent, and you don't prattle nonsense about fashion or eligible bachelors." The old woman's eyes narrowed. "However, others may not be so understanding. You should prepare yourself." The Duchess's warning proved prophetic. By afternoon, a note arrived from Lady Harwick cancelling her scheduled visit. By evening, the butler informed Grace that Lord and Lady Pembroke had requested she not be present during their upcoming dinner engagement. "It begins again," Grace murmured that night, staring at her reflection in the small mirror above her washstand. The face looking back seemed older than her 23 years, shadows beneath her eyes testifying to lessons harshly learned. A knock at her door startled her. It was well past 11, the household should be settled. "Miss Darlington," the Duke's voice low and urgent. Grace clutched her dressing gown tighter, cracking the door cautiously. "Your Grace." "Is something wrong with the Duchess?" "No, grandmother is fine." He looked uncomfortable, a newspaper folded in his hand. "May I speak with you? It's important." Propriety demanded she refuse. A man at her bedroom door at night would only add to her scandalous reputation, yet the gravity in his expression gave her pause. "I'll come to the library in 5 minutes, Your Grace. That would be more appropriate." He nodded, seeming relieved at her solution. 5 minutes. Grace dressed hastily, pinning her hair into a simple knot. When she entered the library, the Duke stood by the fireplace, staring into the flames. He turned at her entrance, his expression troubled. "Thank you for coming down. I apologize for the hour, but this couldn't wait until morning." He gestured to a chair, remaining standing himself. I've just returned from my club where I became aware of this. He handed her the newspaper. It was worse than the morning's brief mention. A full column now, with details of her disgrace embellished to titillating effect. Her name clearly stated. The merchant's daughter who had seduced a naval hero, driven him to suicide, been cast out by her family, and now infiltrated decent society under false pretenses. I see. Grace folded the paper carefully, her hands steady despite the turmoil inside. I assure you, Your Grace, I never misrepresented myself to the Duchess. She was aware of difficulties in my past when she hired me. Grandmother has always had her own ideas about society's rules. His voice was gentle, not condemning. I'm not concerned about her decision to employ you. I'm concerned about the malicious nature of this piece. Grace looked up, surprised. Malicious, it's merely the truth, albeit embellished. Is it? He took the seat opposite her, leaning forward. Commander Radcliffe was a married man nearly twice your age. He deliberately misled you about his marital status, according to my sources, and his suicide followed gambling debts that would have ruined him regardless of any scandal. Grace stared at him, stunned. You've investigated me. Not you specifically. Radcliffe's death caused ripples in naval circles. I serve on several maritime committees in Parliament. His expression darkened. He had a reputation for pursuing innocent young women. You weren't his first victim. Victim? Grace's laugh was bitter. Society doesn't see it that way. I'm the temptress who lured a decorated officer to his doom. Society is often wrong. He stood abruptly, pacing before the fire. This article was planted deliberately. The timing, the details, someone wants to ensure your complete ruin. But why? I'm already disgraced, already cast out. What more could anyone want? That's what troubles me. He stopped, facing her directly. Someone believes you still have something to lose. The implication hung in the air between them. Her position with the Duchess, the only respectable employment she had managed to secure, her last chance at a modest life. I should leave London, Grace said quietly. Find work in the country where my name isn't known. Running won't solve this. Whoever is determined to destroy you will simply follow. His voice softened. Besides, grandmother would be devastated. She's grown quite fond of you. Has she? Grace couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. You didn't know. She speaks of you constantly. Your intelligence, your dignity in difficult circumstances. A small smile touched his lips. She says you're the only companion who doesn't treat her like a child or a relic. Warmth spread through Grace's chest at his words. The Duchess has been kinder to me than anyone since everything happened. Then stay, let me help you face this. Why would you help me? My scandal could taint your family by association. He knelt suddenly before her chair, taking her hands in his. The gesture was so unexpected, so improper, that Grace couldn't find the words to object. Because I recognize injustice when I see it. Because no one should be condemned forever for a single mistake, especially when deliberately deceived. His grey eyes held hers intently. And because I've watched you these past weeks, your kindness to my grandmother, your quiet competence, the way you lose yourself in books about social reform rather than novels of romance. Grace couldn't breathe. His hands were warm around hers, his face too close, too earnest. You don't know me, she whispered. I know enough to recognize someone worth defending. He released her hands, rising to his feet. Will you trust me to help you? Trust, the very word made her flinch. Trust had destroyed her once before, and yet, what would you have me do? Continue as you have been. Show society you won't be driven away by gossip. Meanwhile, I'll discover who is behind these articles. And then we fight back, with truth, not scandal. Grace stood, needing distance from his overwhelming presence. You make it sound so simple. It won't be. There will be more gossip, more cancelled invitations. People you thought friends will turn away. His voice was gentle but unflinching. Can you withstand that? She thought of the alternatives. A life in hiding, forever running from her past, working in obscurity far from London, perhaps as a governess to children in some remote household where her history wasn't known. A life without connection or purpose. I've survived worse, she said finally, but I won't allow the Duchess to suffer for my presence. grandmother has weathered greater storms than this. She was causing scandals when these society matrons were still in leading strings. He smiled, a genuine warmth that transformed his serious face. Besides, nothing entertains her more than defying convention. Over the next several weeks, Lord Briarwood proved true to his word. As society increasingly shunned the Darlington girl, he became more visibly supportive. When the Duchess's carriage was seen at the park, the Duke often accompanied them, walking beside Grace without shame. When invitations to the Duchess began to specify that her companion was not welcome, the Duke escorted both women to the theatre and opera instead. Grace found herself struggling against a dangerous emotion, hope. Each time the Duke defended her, each conversation where he sought her opinions on serious matters, each moment he treated her as a person of value rather than a ruined woman. These accumulating kindnesses were eroding her carefully constructed walls. "You must guard your heart," she reminded herself sternly one afternoon as she watched him from the library window, mounting his horse for a ride. "His kindness is political, not personal. He fights injustice wherever he finds it. You're merely another cause." "Talking to yourself is a sign of intelligence, they say," came the Duchess's voice behind her. "Unless, of course, you're answering yourself. Then it's madness." Grace turned, flushing. "Your Grace, I didn't hear you enter." Evidently, the old woman settled herself in a chair, gesturing for Grace to join her. "You were watching my grandson." There was no point denying it. "Yes, Your Grace. He's a fine man, stubborn, idealistic to a fault, but honorable." The Duchess's shrewd eyes studied Grace. "He's also becoming quite attached to you." Grace shook her head. "He's being kind, fighting an injustice. It's his nature." "Is that what you believe?" The Duchess laughed softly. "My dear, Thomas has championed many causes over the years, but I've never seen him look at a factory bill or a prison reform, act the way he looks at you." "Please don't say such things," Grace whispered, distress evident in her voice. "Even if it were true, which it can't be, it would only bring him pain. A duke cannot associate with a woman like me." "A woman like you?" The Duchess raised an eyebrow. "Intelligent, compassionate, resilient. I should think those qualities precisely what a duke needs." "You know what I mean. I'm ruined, disgraced." "By whose standards?" "The same society that turns a blind eye to men's indiscretions while crucifying women for the same. The society that values wealth over character and connections over kindness." The old woman snorted. "I've lived among them for 70 years, and I assure you their judgment is worth precisely nothing." Grace stared at her hands. "Even if society could be defied, I cannot risk my heart again. I trusted once before, and it cost me everything." "Not everything," the Duchess said gently. "You still have your dignity, your intelligence, your capacity for love. Those are the things that matter." Before Grace could respond, the library door opened and the Duke himself entered, still in his riding clothes. His face was grim. "I apologize for interrupting, but I've discovered something important." He nodded to his grandmother before addressing Grace directly. "I know who's behind the newspaper articles." Grace straightened, apprehension and curiosity warring within her. "Who?" "Lady Radcliffe," he said the name quietly, "the commander's widow." "But why now? It's been months since." "She's recently become engaged to Lord Pennington, who's being considered for a diplomatic post. A connection to scandal, even by marriage, could damage his prospects." The Duke's expression darkened. "She's systematically destroying anyone connected to her late husband's indiscretions to clean her own reputation before the wedding." Grace felt sick. "So she'll continue until I'm completely ruined." "She believes she will." His tone suggested otherwise. "I've learned she's planning something more direct. Her lady's maid confided to one of our footmen that Lady Radcliffe intends to confront you publicly at the Duchess of Richmond's ball next week." The Duchess made a dismissive gesture. "We won't attend then, simple enough." "That would be the prudent course," Lord Briarwood agreed. "However, it would also confirm every rumor. Miss Darlington would be seen as hiding in shame." "What alternative do I have?" Grace asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. "I cannot face London society only to be denounced as a harlot." The Duke knelt before her chair, echoing his position from weeks before. This time, however, he did not take her hands. "You could attend as more than a companion. You could attend as my future wife." The room went utterly silent. Grace couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Even the Duchess appeared momentarily speechless. "Have you lost your mind?" Grace finally whispered. "You cannot possibly." "I am perfectly serious," he interrupted, "and perfectly sane." "Thomas," the Duchess said carefully, "while I admire your desire to protect Miss Darlington, marriage is rather an extreme solution." He looked between them, a flush rising on his cheekbones. "You misunderstand. This isn't merely a solution to the current problem. He drew a deep breath. "I had planned to speak to you privately, Grace, Miss Darlington, but perhaps this is better. Complete honesty, with my grandmother as witness." Grace stood abruptly, needing to put distance between them. "Your Grace, please don't say anything you'll regret." "My only regret would be remaining silent." He rose as well, his expression earnest. "I've developed feelings for you, genuine feelings that have nothing to do with your circumstances and everything to do with who you are. Your intelligence, your strength, the way you've faced adversity without bitterness or self-pity." "This is madness," Grace whispered, though her heart was pounding traitorously. "You're a duke, I'm ruined." "You're the woman I love." He said it simply, without artifice. "And if you could find it in your heart to consider me, not as a protector or champion, but as a man who admires and respects you deeply, I would count myself the most fortunate of men." The Duchess cleared her throat. "Perhaps I should leave you two alone." "No," Grace said quickly. "Please stay, Your Grace, I need clarity right now." She turned to the Duke, forcing herself to speak rationally despite the turmoil within. "Lord Briarwood, even if your feelings are genuine, you cannot seriously contemplate marrying someone with my history. Your position, your family name, mean nothing without personal happiness." He moved closer, though still maintaining a respectful distance. "Grace, I've spent my life trying to correct injustices through legislation and reform. But some wounds can't be healed by law. Some require more personal courage." "The courage to defy society?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "The courage to follow one's heart despite every conventional warning against it?" He smiled slightly. "Something my grandmother has been advising me to do for years." "Indeed I have," the Duchess confirmed, though I never expected him to be quite so dramatic about it. Despite everything, Grace found herself laughing. The sound surprised her. When had she last genuinely laughed? "This is absurd." "Love often is," the Duke said, his eyes never leaving hers. "But I'm not asking for an immediate answer, only that you consider the possibility. That you allow yourself to imagine a future not defined by past mistakes." A future, the concept seemed foreign after months of merely surviving day to day. And Lady Radcliffe, her plans for the ball. "We can still avoid it entirely. Or we can face her together, not as duke and companion, but as a couple with a formal understanding between them. She would not dare attack the future Duchess of Blackmere, regardless of your past." The future Duchess. The title sounded impossible, like something from a fairy story rather than her real life. And yet, the man standing before her was real. His integrity, his kindness, his unwavering support over these difficult weeks, those were real too. "I need time," she said finally. "This is overwhelming." "Of course." He stepped back, giving her the space she needed. "Take all the time you require. My feelings won't change." The Duchess rose slowly, leaning on her cane. "I believe I'll retire to my rooms now. Miss Darlington, perhaps you could assist me after you've had a moment to compose yourself." Grace nodded gratefully. "Yes, Your Grace, I'll attend you shortly." When they were alone, the Duke moved to the window, deliberately turning his back to give her privacy. "I apologize for springing this on you so suddenly. It wasn't how I'd planned to approach the subject." "How had you planned it?" Grace asked, curious despite herself. He glanced over his shoulder, a rueful smile playing at his lips, with considerably more finesse. "Perhaps a private walk in the garden, flowers, a carefully prepared speech." It might have been easier to refuse such a conventional approach. "Is that what you wish to do? Refuse me?" Grace studied him, this man who had become the unexpected center of her world. I wish to protect you from making a decision you'll regret. The scandal of my past will never fully disappear. Then we'll face it together, for as long as necessary. Society will talk. Society always talks. Next season, they'll find some new scandal to occupy them. She shook her head, amazed at his optimism. You truly believe we could overcome all the obstacles? He turned fully toward her then, his expression softening. I believe love is worth fighting for. I believe you are worth fighting for. No one had ever fought for her before. Not her family, who had abandoned her to save their reputation. Not her former fiancé, who had broken their engagement at the first whisper of scandal. She had been so certain she was unworthy of such devotion. The ball is in 5 days, she said quietly. I need until then to decide. He nodded, respecting her need for time. Until then. The days that followed were a tumult of emotion for Grace. She moved through her duties mechanically, her mind constantly returning to the Duke's proposal. The Duchess, to her credit, refrained from pressing the issue, though her knowing glances spoke volumes. On the 4th day, as Grace sat alone in the garden, a messenger arrived with a letter bearing her father's seal. Her hands trembled as she broke the wax, unfolding the single page within. Grace, it began without any affectionate greeting. Information has reached me that you have somehow insinuated yourself into the Duke of Blackmere's household, and furthermore that his attentions toward you have been marked. I write to warn you against any attempt to entrap the Duke into an advantageous marriage. Such a scheme would only compound your disgrace and bring further shame upon our family name. Remember your place and the consequences of your previous indiscretion. Father. Grace stared at the cold words, tears blurring her vision. Even now he assumed the worst of her. No word of concern for her welfare, no hint of fatherly feeling, only fear that she might somehow embarrass him further. Bad news. She looked up to find the Duke standing a few paces away, concern etched on his features. Hastily she folded the letter, nothing of significance. He came closer, sitting beside her on the stone bench. Your expression suggests otherwise. After a moment's hesitation, she handed him the letter. He read it quickly, his jaw tightening with each line. Your father appears to have a rather limited understanding of your character, he said finally, returning the paper. He sees what he expects to see, Grace replied, tucking the letter into her pocket. A daughter who destroyed the family reputation once and would do so again without hesitation. And what do you see when you look at yourself, Grace? The question caught her off guard. She had been defined by others for so long, by scandal, by rumor, by rejection. What did she truly believe about herself? I see someone who made a terrible mistake, she said slowly. Someone who trusted too easily and paid dearly for it, but also, she paused, finding courage from somewhere deep within, someone who has survived. Someone who still believes in goodness despite everything. Someone who might, perhaps, deserve a second chance. His smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds. That's exactly who I see as well. In that moment, Grace understood that her answer had been forming all along, through every kindness he had shown her, every conversation that treated her as an equal, every action that demonstrated his respect. Her fear hadn't been about society's judgment, it had been about trusting her own heart again. I don't want to attend the Duchess of Richmond's ball, she said finally. His expression fell, though he tried to hide his disappointment. I understand, it would be difficult. No, she interrupted gently. I mean I don't want our first public appearance as an engaged couple to be at someone else's event. I want it to be on our terms, not as a reaction to Lady Radcliffe's schemes. He stared at her, hope dawning in his eyes. Does that mean? It means yes, Thomas. Using his given name felt both terrifying and right. I accept your proposal. The joy that transformed his face made her breath catch. He took her hands in his touch gentle but secure. Are you certain? I don't want you to agree out of gratitude or a sense of having no alternative. I'm agreeing because somehow, despite everything, you've helped me rediscover what I thought was lost forever, my capacity to trust, to hope. She squeezed his hands. And because I love you too. It terrifies me to admit it, but it's true. Grace, he whispered her name like a prayer. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, he leaned forward and placed a soft kiss upon her lips. It was brief, chaste, but it sealed a promise between them. When they announced their engagement to the Duchess that evening, the old woman's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Well, it's about time," she declared. "I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in the library together." "Grandmother," Thomas admonished, though his smile belied any real disapproval. "Don't grandmother me, boy. I'm old enough to speak my mind." She fixed Grace with an affectionate gaze. "Welcome to the family, my dear. We're not always conventional, but we're loyal to our own." Family. The word resonated through Grace's heart. She had lost one family through betrayal and shame, but found another through acceptance and love. Instead of attending the Duchess of Richmond's ball, they hosted a small dinner party at Blackmere House, where Thomas formally introduced Grace as his fiancée to a carefully selected group of friends and allies. There were raised eyebrows and whispered comments, of course, but the Duke's evident happiness and the Dowager's formidable support silenced most criticism. Lady Radcliffe, upon learning of the engagement, redirected her vengeful energies elsewhere, unwilling to directly challenge a future Duchess. The scandal sheets found other targets, though occasional references to Grace's past would appear for years to come. Grace's parents, faced with their daughter's astonishing rise in society, attempted a reconciliation. Her mother wrote a tearful letter begging forgiveness. Her father pennied a stiff note expressing satisfaction at her improved circumstances. Grace responded to both with polite but distant acknowledgement. Some wounds, she had learned, required time to heal, and some relationships might never fully recover. They were married the following spring in a ceremony attended by a surprising number of peers and their wives. Society's judgment, it seemed, was flexible when confronted with the unwavering support of one of their most respected members. "Are you happy?" Thomas asked his bride as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. Grace looked up at him, at the man who had seen beyond her disgrace to the person she truly was, who had helped her rebuild not just her life but her sense of self-worth. "Happiness seems too small a word," she replied. "I feel reborn, like everything that happened before was preparing me to recognize what truly matters." "And what is that?" "The courage to be vulnerable again. To trust not just you but myself," she smiled, a genuine expression untainted by fear or reservation. "I spent so long believing I was defined by my mistakes, that love was a luxury I could never again afford." And now, his arms tightened around her waist as they moved across the floor, oblivious to the watching crowd. "Now I know that love isn't a luxury, it's a choice, a daily decision to see beyond appearances and judgments to the truth beneath." She rested her head briefly against his shoulder. "You taught me that, Thomas. You saw me when everyone else looked away." Later that night, as they prepared to depart for their wedding journey, the Dowager Duchess pulled Grace aside for a private word. "I knew from the moment I hired you that you were precisely what my grandson needed," the old woman confided. "Someone who understood that true strength comes not from avoiding pain, but from surviving it. I think you give me too much credit, Your Grace." "Nonsense." "And its grandmother now, remember." Her eyes twinkled mischievously. "Besides, you've given this family something it sorely needed." "What's that?" "A good scandal." The Duchess patted her hand affectionately. "Nothing invigorates a noble lineage like fresh blood, and something for society to talk about for the next decade." Grace couldn't help but laugh. "I'm happy to have been of service, then." "You've been much more than that, my dear." The old woman's expression grew serious. "You've been a reminder that the worst moments of our lives need not define us forever." As the carriage bore them away from London toward Thomas's country estate, Grace watched the city lights recede into darkness. The path that had led her here, through disgrace, betrayal, and despair, seemed almost dreamlike now, a necessary journey to this moment of profound contentment. Thomas took her hand in the darkness of the carriage. "What are you thinking about so intently, my love?" "About how sometimes the things we think will destroy us actually set us free." She turned to him, her heart full. "My family's rejection forced me to find my own strength. Society's condemnation taught me whose opinions truly matter." And your heart's betrayal taught me to recognize genuine love when I finally found it. She leaned against him, secure in the knowledge that some wounds, when healed, leave us stronger than before. With you,